Goodbye. Hello, Heisman.
20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. Oh, the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. No, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
Well, welcome in, one and all, to another episode of The Three Technique, our last ACC preview, part 3. Garrett, we've made it all the way through. After this one, all 4 power conferences. We got the top 5 teams based on our listener power rankings. In the ACC tonight, Garrett, it's been a long run through these 4 conferences the last 4 weeks, but a ton of fun. Do you feel like you have more clarity on how the season is going to go after diving deep into all these teams?
There's a part of me that thinks that I do, right? There's a part of me that thinks that I know what's going to happen now because we've been talking about it. And, that's kind of the false, comfort that you get when you talk this stuff and you do all that research, right? But then, week 1, somebody tears an ACL and then, there's a team that loses a game unexpectedly and, everything goes out the window. So I'd like to say that I know what's going to happen now a little bit better, but, we'll see, especially with the ACC, as much as the middle tier has the ability to punch up. Who knows what's going to happen in the ACC this year?
Well, it's a 2-man crew tonight, Garrett and I, but Mitch fans rejoice. You'll get to hear him and William from the Walk On Red Shirts cover Clemson at the end of this episode. So we'll cover 5 through 2, I guess. And then, spoiler alert, Clemson came in at number 1 on your power ranking. So we'll end the show with them, with Mitch and Will. But Garrett, let's start with number 5. Let's start with the Louisville Cardinals coming in at number 5. Like I said, on the ACC power rankings, 10-4 last year, 7-1 in conference play. They capitalized on a really favorable schedule last year. We kind of highlighted that in the preseason, if you remember this time a year ago. But they got some big wins along the way. NC State, Notre Dame, Miami. Somehow they lost to Pitt. Not a lot of teams figured out how to do that last year, but Louisville was one of them. And they, of course, lost to Florida State in the ACC championship game. 42nd in total offense, 21st in total defense. Jeff Brom, a totally successful first season in Louisville. But as I move into year 2, it is a complete rebuild on the offensive side of the ball. They bring in they lost quarterback. They lost top 2 running backs. They lost most of their receivers. Rebuilding the offensive line. Jeff Brom is an offensive guy. He knows what he's doing on that side of the ball. We saw how he kind of cobbled together a really good offense last year with some pieces, especially at the quarterback position, that seemed like not a lot of people wanted. But can this, I guess my question with Louisville, as we look a little deeper in them, can they rebuild an offense that fast in one offseason to be competitive, not just to win, a nice number of games, but actually push for a college football playoff spot out of the ACC?
I think the question, or I guess rather the answer to that question, would be if they press the right buttons in the transfer portal, right? That's kind of the new age that we live in. You can completely overturn anything in an offseason, right? You have a bad offense, you get the right transfers in, congratulations, you're one of the top offenses, right? You can do that in an offseason. The question is, did they press the right buttons? Did they get the right guys? Starts with Tyler Shuck, obviously. He's the quarterback. He had some issues with injury, obviously, at his previous stop, Texas Tech, and I think a little bit with Oregon as well. But he's got all the talent. He can throw the football. He's a really good, very talented passer. Just if he can stay on the field is the big question there.
He's a 7th-year player, Garrett, and
yeah.
a wise man once told me you don't get 7 years unless you're injury prone.
That's typically what happens. Go see Cam Rising, and I guess, gosh, who else is it? Dylan Gabriel, is he up there at 7? And there's a couple of them, but no, I mean, look, at the end of the day, you're transferring a bunch, you're injured a bunch, you're not playing a bunch. Yeah, that's going to happen, right? And if he can finish a season, if they can protect him well enough, he's talented and can really pass the football well. They also grabbed Colin Lacey, very talented receiver. He can make all the plays on the field, dangerous with the ball in his hands. So, if you can get him in some space, maybe you can scheme up some stuff. Maybe he can be a little bit dangerous, but you're losing both your running backs. Main one primarily is Jawar Jordan. and replacing him is not going to be easy, right? He's super talented, scored a whole bunch last year, big part of their offense. So replacing him at the running back spot is going to be a big deal. How they do that, whether it's by committee, whether they have a stud, like whatever they end up shaking out in fall camp, they're going to have to find a way to run the football again, maybe get some of that pressure off of Tyler Shuck so he doesn't have to take so many hits. But, I think this is a good offensive scheme. I think it's a good system. So I think that they'll be able to have some success. Question is, there's some really, really good defenses across from them, and there's some good defenses in this top group. You're thinking about teams like Clemson, teams like Florida State, even a team like NC State. There's some really good defenses in this ACC that are going to make life really hard for a team like Louisville, who is having to find their rhythm. Who they end up playing, and obviously we can talk the schedule in a second, but who they end up playing and kind of how quickly they can get that rhythm is going to be the big thing for me with Louisville. Defense should be fine. Like, I'm not too worried about the defense. Defense, you got some guys returning, got some guys in the portal, so I'm not really worried about the defense. But the offense, kind of funny enough, I guess you wouldn't necessarily think this of a Brom team, but maybe the offense is going to be lagging a little bit to start the year. How quickly they can get up to speed is going to be my big key with Louisville.
Yeah, with losing so much production, that's definitely my concern as well. I trust Jeff Brom. I trust his scheme. Like you said, he's an offensive guy. He is good at putting a very competent offense on the field. So I think they'll eventually get there by the end of the season. But you're right. It's going to be a testament to how good he is if he can get it implemented from the word go this year. The defense, I'm not concerned at all about. They were a very nice surprise last year. They had a lot of pieces. It was like, okay, if this all comes together, we'll be really happy with it. Top 25 defense in the whole country. I don't think you can complain too much about that if you're a Louisville fan. And most of those guys are back this year, as you said. So could be a defensive-led team. They don't play a ton of offense. They don't play an offense out of the gate that really scares me. We'll get into the schedule in just a second, but maybe some time for both sides of the ball to really gel on the schedule, because the meaty part of it is really towards the end of September. All of October is that meaty part. So let's talk about the schedule. Over-under's 8.5, currently even odds both ways, over and under. You start with Austin Peay and Jacksonville State before a bye week, and you get Georgia Tech at home. For my money, that should be a 3-0 start for Louisville. I know we like Georgia Tech. They're a plucky team. Getting them at home, I think that should be a 3-0 start. But the meat of the schedule really comes the next week after Georgia Tech. This run of 4 weeks is really scary. At Notre Dame, SMU, at Virginia, and Miami at home. That's going to define the season for the Cardinals. If they can find a way to, I think you got to pencil in at Virginia as a win if you're looking for a path to the championship game, which I think we should be framing these discussions of the top 5 in. You got to think you're supposed to win at Virginia. Can you find 2 more wins out of at Notre Dame and then SMU and Miami at home? If you can go 3-1 in that stretch, you're starting to book your flights back to Charlotte for the end of the year and starting to look ahead just a little bit. But that's a really tough 4-week stretch, back to back to back to back, with no bye weeks to space it out.
Yeah, and I want to also emphasize, like, we kind of touched on it, but I think out of that stretch, the ones that you got to be worried about are going to be Georgia Tech and SMU in terms of trap games, because it comes on either side of Notre Dame, right? So you have the possibility of looking past Georgia Tech, who can really score. They don't, who knows on the defensive side, but they can score. You can't look past a team like that can score as you're looking forward to Notre Dame. Obviously, a road game at Notre Dame is going to be really tough, and then you come home for SMU, which, again, another offense that plays really well. This time, also a defense that can play really well. And you want to be in your best headspace to not be in a letdown spot right after Notre Dame. Let's say that you go lose that game, you got to bounce back real quick and get your mojo back against SMU. So those are 2 games I think, like, if you're going to say that Louisville has a good season, got to win both. There's just no way that you can say that, oh, we're going to drop one of those 2 and then have the confidence through the rest of the season that you can go win the games you need to, right? Versus Miami, at Clemson at the beginning of November. And then obviously there's the Kentucky game at the end too. It should be an interesting one. So, for me, I look at the schedule. I think I like the over here. I think they have the ability to get to 9. I don't know that 10 is really on the table with Notre Dame, Clemson, and Miami. those are three teams I think are all markedly better right now, at least markedly more reliable right now than what Louisville is. But I mean, you go take care of business on the rest of your schedule, and maybe just find a way to be in a couple of those games late, right? Snag a win against one of them, maybe that you're not expecting. Who knows? You could be talking about a really good season again in Louisville, and if that happens, you got to watch out because they're going to start turning into a destination once they can go and be at the top of the ACC a couple years in a row. I still think 9 wins should be a good thing for this team. But again, like there's too many variables, I think, on Louisville right now. What do they do with the offense? Can Tyler Shuck stay healthy? Right? How quickly can they get this offense back going? How can they get the run game established quickly? Too many variables right now that I don't know that I can totally trust them, but still one of the best teams in this conference. And there's a reason why we're talking him in the top tier.
Yeah. And after the Miami game, just to close out their schedule, it's a little bit softer, but it's not easy by any stretch of the imagination. Again, have not mentioned the second bye week yet. You go after Miami, it's immediately to Boston College, at Clemson back to back. That's obviously a difficult place to play, followed by a tricky quarterback. Finally get your second bye week, and then you close at Stanford all the way across the country, Pitt at home, and then you play in Lexington where Garrett, they haven't beaten Kentucky anywhere since 2017. 5 straight wins for the Wildcats. I knew that Kentucky had been winning a lot of those matchups, and Louisville fans don't need me to say this. They're well aware of that streak.
I got to get back on the dub. So you could say they do. Like maybe it's just time for them to go win that game. But, look, you got to. I mean, especially if we're talking about a couple of those teams early in the schedule, you got to win that game.
Yep, absolutely. And it doesn't matter for ACC standings, obviously, but for pride and you want to win the rivalry game to close it out and finally get that monkey off your back. But Louisville, a lot of questions to answer on the offense. If those questions, the answers are yes, then they're going to be right there competing for the conference title once again for the second year in a row. Let's go to a team that has not played for an ACC title ever, and that is the Miami Hurricanes. And Hurricane fans hate hearing that.
A little tongue-in-cheek there.
A little tongue-in-cheek, but I get it. You hate hearing that, but it's true, and it's really a just crazy stat that for however long they've been in the conference. I know they used to be in the Big East and even independent before that, but to have never even played for a conference title is just mind-numbingly amazing to me. 7-6 last year. We thought the U was back. They started 4-0 with that big win over Texas A&M at home. Then they lost 5 of their next 7, and they lost in some spectacular fashions. You'll recall the Georgia Tech game where it was in the bag, and then Mario Cristobal found a way to lose that game. Lost to Rutgers in the Pinstripe Bowl. Really statistically not a bad team last year. They were 31st in total offense, 24th in total defense. That offensive number was with quarterback roulette happening and Tyler Van Dyke not taking the step forward that we hoped and expected of him. So 3rd season for Mario Cristobal, it means that we are bringing in a lot of new pieces. We're cleaning house. We're trying to get the right pieces, the right pegs into the right holes. There's a lot of new offensive talent to work with. Cam Ward is the headliner coming down from Washington State, guy that Mitch and I really started highlighting a couple years ago when he got to Wazoo from Incarnate Word. We're still waiting to see that big spark from him at this level, but he was one of the top quarterback targets in the transfer portal. So Damian Martinez, having him in the backfield out of Oregon State should help him a lot as well. But for me, Garrett, it's time for Miami. Everybody's talking about the coach up in the northern part of the state, Billy Napier, being on the hot seat. If you go 7-6 again, 6-6, flirting with bowl eligibility with the talent that you brought in and the schedule that you have this year, it's time to put Mario Cristobal firmly on the hot seat and maybe start over again in Miami.
Yeah, man. I mean, schedule for Miami is very manageable this year, but I want to talk about kind of what they're doing. At this point, I think your biggest criticism and your biggest, what if about Miami is just, and this is the worst thing that you can say to a fan base, right? Because you don't want to hear it, but you hadn't done it, so why should we believe, right? That is true for several programs, not just Miami, right? We're talking about several programs. You're saying you hadn't done it in a while, so why should we believe in you now, right? You made the case. You've had some talent. You've had some good players. You've done well in the transfer portal. You've recruited well. You've got the coach. You've got whoever. And, for a little while, it's just been, hey, we just hadn't gotten it done. Here's the thing. I'm starting to get kind of high on Miami this year because I think that they've got some of the better players, some of the better transfer portal players. Obviously, Cam Ward's going to steal the headlines, and from Oregon State, everyone's going to talk about that other quarterback in state, who I'm sure we'll talk about here in a minute, DJU. But I think the biggest pickup was Damian Martinez from Oregon State, right? I think that was the biggest transfer out of that program because as much as you want to say DJU is a good quarterback, game manager, whatever, Damian Martinez is what made that offense go last year. So I think, Miami kind of got the right piece from Oregon State and, might have gotten the right quarterback as well, passing on DJU, ended up getting, Cam Ward. So you put those two guys back there, a guy who can really sling it and a guy who can seriously tout the rock, put them behind a really, really good offensive line, got a couple pieces back. I know it's not going to be 100% the same, but they are going to be breaking in, and should be a very good offensive line unit. Xavier Restrepo, I like him a bunch, real playmaker outside. So like what he can do in the wide receiver core. At this point, look, it's kind of like what you're saying. It's just time, right? It's time for them to do something with it. And I think that they finally will. This is a very good Miami team. I think my biggest question for them right now is going to be in the secondary. Lost a bunch of pieces, whether to the draft or just, phased out. But, I think it's going to be how quick can they kind of settle in the back end. But, I mean, I'm looking here at their, kind of what they're bringing back. They got guys in the front on the defensive side that should be just fine. And I think that, at this point, you're just out of excuses, right? You've got receivers. You've got the running back who can be a stud. You've got the offensive line. You've got a competent quarterback who's shown that he can succeed at other places. It's time to put it together, right? It's time to finally put it together and not have an excuse, right? It's not going to be, well, this quarterback underperformed or, well, it's a new coach, whatever. You got to take the excuses away at a certain point. Like your schedule is super manageable. I don't know if you want to get into that, but starting with Florida, obviously, whatever team wins that game, their seasons are off to very different trajectories. They're both going to need that one. You play Florida A&M, that should be a win. Ball State, that should be a win. USF, sneaky, but you should still win that game. They can score at USF, but you should still win that game. Virginia Tech, another one of those games where you got to take them seriously, but I think you're better than Virginia Tech. At Cal, you should win that game. Really, the tough stretch, and Virginia Tech is a tough team, but that tough stretch is really coming out of the bye week at Louisville, Florida State. That's a tough little twosome right there in the middle. And that's really where I think the season gets defined for Miami. You should take care of your business if you're Miami and win that first, first 6 games. The next 2 coming out of your bye week, that's going to define what your season is. 10-2, that's fine. It's a good season, right? But I think a lot of Miami fans would say 10-2 with losses to Louisville, Florida State, and cleaning up the rest. That might be a little disappointing, right? That might be like, hey, I think we had a better team than that. I think we were better than 10-2. And they might have been right, but it's just time for them to finally step up and say, hey, like, we can take care of this. We can actually get it done. And if Cristobal is going to have success there, I think it has to start this year, right? I think at a certain point, you can't sell your program if you get the big name transfers and then still don't win, right? And so he's got to step up and do it too. I'm sure he knows that. And I think that they will. But yeah, it's going to be those 2 games in October, Louisville, Florida State. That's going to probably define their whole season.
Yeah, and you're spot on with that. I want to talk. We can get back into the schedule in just a second. Am I wrong to be concerned about the defense? Because I think they brought in some guys from the portal. Definitely retooled the defensive backfield. I think that was needed. Michelle Powell, the nickelback coming in, brought some guys in up front as well. But they lost some dudes on that side of the ball as well. Cam Kinchin's a safety. The linebacker Corey Flagg transferred to Mizzou. I don't know. Like they weren't bad on defense. Like I said, they were 24th overall in total defense last year. Not bad by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just a little worried with the guys that they might have to replace on that side of the ball. Yep. They luckily don't play an offense that terrifies me until they play Virginia Tech. And even Virginia Tech, if you can contain Kyron Drones, I think you're feeling pretty good about yourself. So you're right. That middle portion of the schedule is really going to define the season. For me, it's the run from Virginia Tech through Florida State. So Virginia Tech at Cal, at Louisville, Florida State. Those games that you highlighted, Garrett. Because after that Florida State game, it's Duke at Georgia Tech, Wake Forest at Syracuse.
You should win all those games.
If Miami is who we think they are and who we think they should be, they should easily win all 4 of those games. Like none of those should really be close in my mind.
Yeah.
So that 4-game stretch where you're hosting Virginia Tech, at California, going all the way across the country, at Louisville, Florida State, got to go at least 2-2 there. And I think even 2-2 is probably a little disappointing, given I think they'll be favored by probably about a touchdown against Virginia Tech. They'll be favored by more than that at Cal. And the other two, Louisville and Florida State, are probably going to be considered toss-ups, with Florida State being at home.
Yeah. I think, to your point on the defense, I don't think it's completely irrational to be concerned about the defense. I think the defense is going to be just fine. The big question mark for me is in the secondary. Like that's just where you have to wonder about it. Again, Cam Kinchin's obviously not going to be playing this year, but like I think that they have enough pieces. They've gotten a bunch of transfers in. So again, like this is, you played the transfer portal, you should have your talent, right? They got some guys for the secondary. They got some guys transfer in for the secondary. And I think that it's going to be okay. I think they're going to play well. It's really just going to be, how quickly they can get up to speed in this, new system for a lot of the transfers, right? A lot of the transfers coming into a new system. How quickly can you get sped up with that? I think if we're at the end of the season and we're disappointed in Miami, I think pass defense is going to be the reason we're talking about them in a not so favorable light, right? I think it's going to be, you gave up too many big time plays to Virginia Tech. Heck, USF can tear it up a little bit too. So, maybe you gave up too many big plays to USF and that was a little too close for comfort. Louisville, maybe, we just talked about them. If Shuck's dealing at that point and, Colin Lacey's doing his thing, he could have a big day if the secondary doesn't play well. Florida State, obviously super talented, so they could also be in that situation too. I think that Miami, I think Miami's going to have a good season. I think that they're going to do really well. I'm at the point now where I'm saying if it's not that, it's truly going to be because the secondary let them down. Like I don't think they're going to have an issue up front too much, but I think it's going to be because the secondary let them down that they fail if they fail.
Or the coaching. It's either going to be secondary or coaching to me.
And I think that would fall on coaching, right? If your secondary guys can't be in the right position, that's going to be on coaching and your defensive coordinator. But again, it could work out that way, but I think it's a lot more likely that everything clicks into place and Miami finally turns into that top tier program we've been waiting for them to be for the last couple of years. I think it's likely that, since we saw NIL went up, I think a lot of us are thinking, well, Miami, they're going to probably crush NIL, right? And they're going to be able to get guys and, dominate some transfer portal. And we really hadn't seen that too much up until this last offseason. So I think this is the moment for them to finally step up, right? Got to happen now. You got big time playmakers across the board. It's time to just do it.
Absolutely right. I think my dog agrees in the background, if you guys can hear that. But I think you're absolutely right. 9.5 over under. That's kind of unheard of for teams that have not proven it on the field very often. So the Vegas agrees. The schedule is very workable, very winnable, and Miami should be doing quite a bit with it. Let's keep moving on down the list. Number 3 on our list, one of my favorite teams in the entire country this year, the NC State Wolfpack. Garrett, this is a team that has broken my heart several times in the last few years. And gosh darn it, I'm ready to be hurt again. They found a way to go 9-3 in the regular season last year. 6-3 in conference. Really no bad losses. Like the one to Duke without Riley Leonard was kind of questionable, but 5-game winning streak to close the regular season. They had a QB carousel trying to replace Devin Leary. MJ Morris basically quit on them in the middle of the year and said, I'm good. I'm going to use my red shirt. And they still found a way to win their last 5, go 9-3 and make it to the Pop-Tarts Bowl. So the offense was abysmal, 94th in the entire country. I mentioned the quarterback carousel that they were playing last year. But the defense, as always, was the strength of the team. 29th in the country. That 3.35 was working as it always does. Garrett, I'm very bullish on NC State this year, and I'll tell you why. My boy Grayson McCall coming up to the big leagues from Coastal Carolina. I know what I'm saying when I say this. He will be the best college quarterback that Dave Doran has had at NC State. I've said that multiple times this offseason. I'm double, triple,
I think I'm
quadrupling
okay
down
with
on
that.
that.
I think that's good.
He will be the best quarterback that Dave Doran has had. And I really love the weapons that he has around him. Jordan Waters coming over from Duke.
Mm-hmm.
The big guy is Casey Concepcion, who broke out as a freshman last year. Noah Rogers, a former 5-star, coming down from Ohio State. Wesley Grimes from Wake Forest. There's a lot to like about the skill positions. A lot to like. There's a lot. There's a lot of help coming back on the defense. They lost Peyton Wilson, who was one of the best linebackers in their history, just a great player for years and years and years for them. But they addressed a lot of that in the portal. They brought in a lot of linebackers and secondary guys in the portal. So, man, I'm really, I'm really struggling to not be excited about NC State. So, if you disagree with that, I'm happy to listen. But I love the schedule. I love the offensive skill position talent and the line that it looks like they're building. And I really love the fit that Grayson McCall is with Robert and I think his skill set fits so well with what Robert and I wants to do as the offensive coordinator. Tell me where I'm wrong. What am I overlooking with NC State that I shouldn't be all in on their bandwagon this year?
I don't think you're overlooking that much. I mean, I think this is a team that until they show it on offense, it's going to be hard to believe they can be good on offense. But I mean, my gosh, they did a great job in the portal getting their guys on offense. I personally love Jordan Waters. I think he's a great running back. I think he's going to be really, really, really good for NC State. And obviously, you've highlighted McCall, right? He's very successful, has lots of experience. Nothing about the game should be too fast for him, right? Nothing should be like, oh, I'm adjusting to the next level. Like, he's been around. He should be just fine. I think the big thing is going to be if they can put it all together, right? This is just about getting the offense to put it together, where, we just kind of haven't seen NC State with a real good dominant offense for what seems like several years now. I'm sure I'm probably exaggerating a little bit, but they've just been kind of this team you look at and you say, oh, they play really good defense, but they're going to have to win games kind of like Iowa, right? Where they're not going to score all that much. They're going to be a little inefficient. They'll get their opportunities, right? They're better than Iowa on offense, obviously. But they feel like a team like Iowa, where you're saying like they're going to have to grind it out and win this thing, 20-14 or something like that. I don't think that's going to be true for NC State this year. I think they're still going to play really good defense, but they're going to score a lot more points. And the big thing is, I wonder what happens when opposing teams realize that Concepcion is the weapon he is, and they just start saying, nope, you're doubled with the safety. We're just not going to let you beat us, right? What do you do then? Can McCall make the reads, go find the open guys, and can they deliver, right? You're talking about guys like Noah Rogers. Can he deliver, coming out? He's highly touted, plenty talented, but can he step up and become a great receiver with, NC State? I think he can. It's just going to be kind of a wait and see until it happens. For me, NC State, the only reason to pump the brakes here on how great their season could be has to do with the fact that the beginning of their schedule has a couple of really tough spots and a couple very important games, right? This is a team that if you can win one of your first, kind of two big games, they go Western Carolina, they play Tennessee in the Dukes Mayo Classic, and then they're playing Louisiana Tech and at Clemson. Tennessee and Clemson are your big two games right there. And obviously you're playing neither of those at home, right? You're playing Tennessee and, North Carolina. And then you're playing Clemson at Clemson. So you're not playing either of those games at home. You're not playing either of these games in a spot where you're feeling really, really comfortable. But you're going to have to find a way to win one of those games if you want this season to be special, right? And I don't know if I'm an NC State fan, I don't know which one I prefer. Would I prefer beating Clemson and kind of having that, in conference, kind of path to the conference championship game, or would I rather beat Tennessee, make that statement out of conference, maybe bolster my resume a little bit, depending on how good Tennessee does this year? I don't know. And if you're an NC State fan, you're saying, why can't we just win both of them, right? And you definitely can. But they're going to have to find a way to win one of those, because I think, unfortunately, if they go 10-2 with the rest of their schedule, I don't think it's good enough to get them into the playoff. I just don't. And
they'd have to win the ACC championship game.
They would,
if they go 10-2. The beautiful thing about one of those games being a non-conference game is their conference record would still be 8-1 or whatever it is. So they could certainly still make the conference championship game, and then anything can happen.
there's not enough like big teams to really boost a resume. And we just saw last year with Florida State, like they went undefeated and the committee said, nah, we're good. So outside of winning the conference, which again, Florida State wins their conference, they still get left out. But I think outside of winning the conference this year with the auto bids, I don't think a 10-2 NC State can get in. An 11-1 NC State team with a win either, versus Tennessee or at Clemson, either one of those wins I think is good enough to get them in at 11-1, even if they, somehow the math works out wrong and, they don't even end up playing in the championship game. I still think 11-1 gets them in. They just have to find a way to, I think, win one of those two games because the rest of the schedule is super manageable. I can kind of run through it real quick. NIU, Wake Forest, Syracuse, at Cal. You go off. You're playing Stanford, Duke, another bye week, and then at Georgia Tech, at North Carolina. I don't think any of those games really scare you as an NC State fan. I think you're looking at that saying we should win all those games. And then, again, it's just beginning of the season. Can you build enough hype? Can you win one of those games? Get up to a good start? If you can, I think this could be a really special season for NC State. Otherwise, I think you're looking at another team where we're saying, yeah, NC State was really good this year. And we're just, end of the season, they'll play a good bowl game, a competitive opponent, probably even win, and then, okay, we'll see you next year.
Yeah, Dave Doran loves winning 9 games. As a program, they've won more than 9 just once in their entire history.
Wow.
That was the Phillip Rivers year where they won 11 back in the early 2000s.
Yeah,
that's one of the most every time I come across that statistic, it's one of the most mind-blowing ones in all of college football. The fact that NC State only has one 10-plus win season in their entire history. But, hey, maybe it could be 2. Man, I'm feeling really good about that because you're right. Other than the Tennessee and Clemson games, I'm not conceding those either. I think
not conceding.
With a new quarterback in the 3-3-5 defense that has made a lot better quarterbacks, a lot more proven quarterbacks than Nico really see ghosts. Not conceding that one. And then they've beaten Clemson. They're 2-1 against Clemson post Trevor Lawrence. So I'm not conceding the Clemson game for NC State
and
either.
To be clear, I wasn't saying they were going to lose both of those.
Yeah.
I'm saying those are your tough games.
Right? Those are the 2 toughest on the schedule by far.
We're going to be in a dogfight. We got to find a way to win this thing.
Those are the 2 toughest on the schedule by far. You laid out the rest of the schedule. It's really a wide open opportunity for the Wolfpack to get to Charlotte and get to the ACC championship game.
Yeah.
We'll see. Over under 8.5. Over is the betting favorite at this point. The odds lean you to pick towards over. And yeah, it's going to be a fascinating season for NC State. Let's go to our last team that we're going to cover, and then Mitch and will take over for Clemson. The Florida State Seminoles. I don't need to rehash the story. We all know the story. It was an awful decision by the committee to leave them out of the college football playoff last year, after a undefeated season, the ACC champions. A lot of that team's gone, though. And Mike Norvell is going to enter his 5th season, placing a lot of talent that went to the NFL. Jordan Travis, Jared Verse, Keon Coleman, Trey Benson. I could keep going, but you get the picture. A lot of guys from that squad are gone. They did dip into the portal, as all great teams will do. But I'm fascinated by Florida State this year, Garrett. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how DJ Uiagalelei comes back into the conference that he left. He left the ACC disgraced. He came in with a lot of hype, and the lights just seemed too bright for him when he was at Clemson. He goes and spends a year on the left coast at Oregon State, kind of gets his thoughts together. Now he's back, and I'm fascinated to see how that story plays out because last time we saw him in this conference, it wasn't pretty what we saw. And maybe that was the scheme at Clemson being a bad fit for him. Maybe it was a million different things. But I'm really interested to see how he handles being back in the ACC. Marvin Jones Jr. from Georgia is an edge rusher they brought in to hopefully replace some of that production from Jared Verse. And they basically imported all of Bama's depth. Bama lost a lot of depth pieces. Sean Murphy, Earl Little, Roydell Williams, and a few other guys as well, coming from Tuscaloosa to Tallahassee. So the offensive identity is really interesting to me. Are they going to what are they going to ask DJU to do? And I think the answer to that question could define their season. They have a stacked running back room, and the defense should still be one of the top 2 or 3 in the conference. But What are they going to ask DJU to do?
If they're smart, they're going to ask him to do what he had to do at Oregon State because that's where he won, right? That's where he had success. I think there were times at Clemson where I think you saw the game speed up a little bit for him and he didn't really know how to process what was going on in front of him. And I think he's probably past that. But still, if you want to put a quarterback in a good position to win, you want to give him quick reads, easy reads, things to look for. And I think Florida State's going to do that really well. I think they're going to put him in a good position to win. I love what they were able to do with Jordan Travis the last couple of years, and I think they're going to kind of just copy paste the strategy, right? Get him in a little bit of space sometimes, and let him kind of do his thing, right? I think it's really interesting looking at this team because this team almost is a carbon copy, but with just different names, right? You've gone out and you get Marvin Jones Jr. from Georgia. He's your big time defensive end now, right? Jared Verse is out, Marvin Jones Jr. is in, and you're kind of saying like, well, what's the difference? Well, it's just big time D end, right? Not the same style of player exactly, but still dominant defensive ends. DJU, there's a lot of comparisons you can make to Jordan Travis. I think Roydell Williams is a very versatile back. I think maybe a little bit more versatile than what you're able to get the last couple of years. He should provide a little extra spark. I don't know if the receivers are quite as dynamic as what they've had the last couple of years. They had some really good receivers the last couple of years, but still, they've replaced the receivers with some very talented receivers. So this should be more or less the same Florida State team we've seen. My big thing with Florida State is, okay, like you've shown that you can win defensively. You've shown that you can win kind of being a very conservative offense. You've shown that at times you can kind of bust it open and score on some big plays. I want to see it come together, and I want to see it be a little bit more dynamic, right? Give, people something to talk about. They got the biggest chip on their shoulder this year, right? They're going to be playing, pissed off, ready to go. How dare they show us the door on the way out, right? And it's going to start week 0 against Georgia Tech, right? They're going to come out and they're going to say, it's time to make a statement. It's probably going to be a bad day to be a Yellow Jacket, unfortunately, for kind of the hype train that we were building up last season. Going to be probably a bad day for a Yellow Jacket because Florida State's going to want to come out there and say, "Nuh-uh, this is who we are. This is the team that we want to be." And they're going to start saying like, "Oh, so just winning wasn't good enough. Let's start running up some scores to try to prove to the committee we deserve to be in." So, I think Florida State's on a mission this year. I think they're going to be a very, very good football team this year. Really the big thing is just, did they push the right buttons in the transfer portal? I think they did. I think they did a really good job taking some big time players from some big time programs. At the end of the day, this is going to be a very good Florida State team, just like it was last year.
The thing that interests me about their portal takes this year, not all of them, but in the past, they went and got guys. I'm thinking of like Keon Coleman, right? He was the dude at Michigan State.
Yep.
They get him down there to be their wide receiver one. Not necessarily guys that were the focal points of offenses at their respective schools, right? Like Roydell Williams was behind a couple talented guys at Alabama. Definitely got a lot of playing time, looked good.
Yep.
But Hakeem Williams the same way, Malik Benson, not necessarily the focal points of the offenses that they were on, and behind talented guys to be sure, especially the guys that were at Alabama. But that's just going to be interesting to me. Just a little nugget to file away. Can they step up and be the focal point?
And there's a reason they're transferring, right? It's because they weren't getting that opportunity where they were, and so now they're here, right? And there's a reason they were where they were, right? There's a reason Roydell Williams is at Alabama. It's because he's a very good running back, right? Nick Saban doesn't take bad running backs. And so, looking at Roydell Williams, he didn't get the opportunity probably because he didn't quite beat out the other guys in front of him, but he played in some very important spots and, was really good in it. And I think, take that and just copy paste it for everybody down the line. There are a lot of really talented players who they just weren't getting the opportunities because the guys in front of them. And like, frankly, even if they were on Florida State last year, weren't going to be getting the opportunities either, right? It's hard to make the case that, if you're looking at Malik Benson, right? Is he going to be out, Keon Coleman? Probably not, right? He's probably not beating him out to win that starting receiver spot. But this year, he's the guy. He can be the guy. It's going to be interesting. I'm really curious to see what they can do. They're going to have to find a way to stretch it a little bit and get the ball down the field. They're going to have to find a way to get into that deep passing game a little bit. But, maybe set up some play action, do what you got to do. But I think they're going to be able to move the football and go on their little revenge tour.
Well, let's talk their schedule real quick. one that's reversed of how a lot of teams' schedules step out, where their conference games are front loaded and then they end the year with 3 non-conference games. Notre Dame, Charleston Southern, and Florida. Just a weird nugget there.
Yeah.
The key stretch to me, it's for all these teams in the ACC. I think the path to the playoff revolves around. We saw the disrespect that Florida State got last year, even going undefeated. To me, that signals the path to the playoff to make sure that you get in is getting that auto bid. I don't know what the path is for a team in the ACC to get an at-large bid. I'll just be honest, as we're sitting here in August. So to me, this key stretch is that run from SMU to Miami. I think that's going to define their season, because if they can win through those, it's at SMU, Clemson at home, bye week at Duke, and at Miami. So 3 of those 4 are on the road. You've got to find a way to beat SMU and Duke on the road and then split those other 2. If you can do that, if you can split Clemson and Miami, you're looking pretty good to book your spot into the winner-take-all ACC championship game. And I think that's the goal for Florida State. Just find a way to get to that game and then let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, and honestly, I think they're looking for it all. I mean, obviously everyone's trying to win every game they play, but I think Florida State has a good reason to think that they can go through this schedule and win them all. Clemson, very tough game, but that's at home, right? You get to play the game at home. Yes, you have to go to Miami, but Miami, for all that they're probably going to end up being this year, not the best home field environment, right? Hopefully some fans show up for a good Miami team this year, but I mean, so far we just haven't seen the support come out in mass force, right? The fans that go are very passionate and love their team, but for some reason we just haven't seen the numbers at Miami yet. So hopefully they'll start showing up a little bit with a very good Miami team here. But I mean, again, like you were saying, even if you split at a minimum those, I still think when it comes to their seeding and where they want to be as a program, if you split those, that game at Notre Dame becomes so important, because you're going to have to beat Notre Dame. It'll be a statement win towards the end of your schedule. It'll be the last real chance you have to make a real impression on the committee. And that could be for seeding. You know, if it's your ACC and you're the champion, you might be thinking, what's the difference between 3 and 4? Or even if, you know, for some reason they don't get the bye as the champion because maybe the dropped a game or something like that, it's going to be very important to beat Notre Dame and make a big statement in order to solidify one of those top seeds. And you really can't look at, there's a couple of games you really can't look over. You know, Florida at the end of the season, I don't think we expect too much from Florida, but they're a good team. They should be better as a team, but again, just rivalry situation, end of the year, they should be playing better. And even if they don't have the schedule to show for it, it's still going to be a better team than their schedule shows. And you really can't overlook Memphis either, a very, very good, you know, G5 team that I think a lot of people are picking to make the playoff as kind of that G5 champ. You could see Memphis in the playoff, and you know,
and they'll be looking for a signature win to
they're gonna be looking for that
differentiate themselves.
And as much as there could be easy schedules, Memphis has the Florida State game, and that's it. Like, they don't play anybody else, and so they'll be gearing up for this one. They've been looking at this one all offseason, so you can't overlook that one. But if they can stay focused, if they can keep everything going, Norvell's got his guys going, I think that's going to be a really good season for Florida State. I think they're going to be able to roll. And the one big thing with it, and I've said it a couple times, but the chip on their shoulder is going to drive them. You get a team with motivation, you get a team with a locker room, and these guys have been, you know, talking about it. And I know they got a lot of transfers, but the guys that have been there, going to be talking about it. They're going to have a bitter taste in their mouth. And anybody walking into that locker room, I guarantee, has the same mindset, because they say, oh, what happened? And, you know, everybody around them is just going to be sitting there, a little bit of that bitter taste in their mouth and a little bit of grumbling, and they can feel it when they walk in the locker room. So I think this is going to be a really good season for Florida State. Teams that play pissed off and motivated end up winning a bunch of games. And when your schedule sets up like this, I think they're in a really good spot.
The last thing I'll say on Florida State, the reason I say that they should just worry about getting to that conference championship game and letting the chips fall is because they could have that locked up by November 2nd. That's just a really weird, unique spot to be in. And at that point, just go here with me.
Mm.
You know, the ACC is getting a max of 2 bids.
Right.
It's November 2nd. You're 7-1 in the ACC. You can't do anything else, right? you're sitting there, you're looking around the conference, and you're like 95% sure you're in that conference championship game. Why even play your starters after what happened last year against Notre Dame, Charleston Southern, and Florida?
That's going to be a really interesting scenario. Well, Notre Dame, you got to play them because you got to win that game, and it's a statement.
You don't. No, you don't have to win that.
Well, not
game.
for your cup, but I'm saying I think that is the difference between because if you got one loss, right? You're what after 9 games, 8-1, you got one loss.
But after you got disrespected last year by going undefeated, do you really think that they're going to give you an at-large? Like, I'm just trying to get in Mike Norvell's brain here.
But that's why it's interesting, right? Because on one hand, you're saying can't lose our quarterback, right? That happened last year. It's going to be in the back of your head that we're going to be up 14 and like, oh, why are we risking it? But in the other side of your head, you're going to say we won every single game on our schedule and we still got left out. Winning your conference isn't enough, whatever. And so it's not going to be about making the playoff. It's going to be about that. Do I get a first round bye? Because 10-2 versus 11-1 is I think a pretty big deal this year. There's going to be a lot of really good teams. I think a lot of conference champions are going to be, kind of tested. And so being able to jump up and grab one of those is going to be really, really important. I think they're going to have to sit there and weigh their options because on the one hand, you got to win, but on the other hand, you got to not get hurt.
It would be the ultimate middle finger to the committee to just say, we're not going to play the month of November. We are 7-1 in the ACC.
That'd be really
95% sure we're going to be in the ACC championship game. Our starters are not playing. Congrats to our
ready to learn.
You're going to get a real Rudy story getting to play at Notre Dame.
They're going to be like going for it on every 4th down and like kicking onsides all the time just to be like,
they're going to punt on first down. They're just not going to play the game. Like,
but then you're risking your defensive guys, right?
Who cares? We're in the ACC championship game, and if we win that one, we're in the playoff. I know that would probably never happen.
Yeah, I was going to say, I still think there's a little too much pride, but it would be interesting because you're going to be tempted, and I don't know if it'll be whole game stuff, but you're going to start to see, I think, like, how bad do we really want to win this game? Like, if it's close with Notre Dame at the half, they'll probably play it. But if they're up a bunch or down a bunch, I think you see backups in the second half. Because I just think they're going to say, I don't care. I don't want to injure a guy. Charleston Southern, you may not play a starter the whole game. Florida, you want to win that game because it's a rivalry game. But if you're up a bunch of the half, you're going to sit your starters. Like, this is just you for what it is. The fact that we have a playoff, the fact that you have a lot more spots, it's going to start looking like the NFL where you're going to see the starters for a couple of drives and then they're going to be gone because you want to say, we're going to keep you fresh. We're going to keep you in a rhythm and we're going to keep you not hurt.
All that is predicated on them being 7-1 or 8-0 in the ACC. So we'll see what happens. This is just an interesting nugget. I don't know. I haven't seen anybody really discuss that nugget on Florida State's schedule. So we'll have to throw it out to the big boys. Throw it out to Andy Staples or some of the other guys out there to see what they think about that take. So that's all but one team in the ACC. Garrett and I will see you next week when we get into the G5. And Mitch has an awesome interview lined up with Ty Hildebrandt. Speaking of big guys, Ty Hildebrandt of the Solid Verbal to talk about Notre Dame. Right now, we're going to throw it over to Mitch and Will from the Walk On Red Shirts as they break down Clemson. We'll let them take it away.
Well, Moose, it's good to have you back on the podcast. Of course, you were with us for our fantasy draft a couple of weeks ago, and I guess the first question I got to ask you is, how did you handle the shots fired at your roster over Twitter?
Haters. If you ain't got haters, you ain't popping. I'm pretty sure that was Mahatma Gandhi who said that. So let the haters talk. Bring it on. When my team is holding up the trophy, we'll keep the receipts. We keep the receipts.
There you go. That's fair. Totally understandable as well. Well, it's no secret why we have you on the podcast as a alumni, former. Well, I guess is it like an Aggie where once you're a Tiger, you're always a Tiger? You're not ever a former.
Yeah. It's just stuck with you for the rest of your life.
There you go. Like so lifelong Clemson Tiger, a man of international renown, possibly. After the article that was written about walk-ons, you appeared in that. Mr. Clemson Tiger is with us to break down Clemson and Dabo's task ahead of him in this 2024 season. And Moose, let me ask you this to start. What are the expectations that Clemson has in 2024? Is Dabo in an uncomfortable place as the head coach, or are folks starting to kind of warm back up?
I think Dabo. So Dabo's unique in the sense that he's not plugged in, so he doesn't have social media. But I think Dabo's seat is only hot from his own temperature, and what I mean by that is he's not meeting his expectations in terms of production on the field. In terms of the fans or the hot seat, the fans are fickle. I mean, they've always been that way, and they always will. We picked up a lot of spoiled fans along the way, especially from people who weren't there when Clemson was happy to make a bowl game. Now we're unhappy if we don't make the playoff. So the expectation, I think, coming in for the Tigers, whether it be in the locker room, it's national championship. That's every single year. Win the opener, win the division, which there isn't a division anymore. Win the conference, win the state, win the playoff. Well, it used to be win the bowl. Now it's win the playoff. So I don't think that changes. And Dabo's purpose seems to be bigger than football and production on the field. Obviously, he can't keep his job, but his purpose seems to help align with the success. So I think the fans are more disappointed than the boosters and the people who would have control over his job.
How was the lack of a 10-win season kind of reacted to, not necessarily from the fans on Twitter, but those around the program, like you said, those that have been around since Clemson was fighting just to make a bowl game? Did that actually matter as much as the larger Twitter sphere made it seem?
Unfortunately, I think the Twitter sphere aligns pretty well with what people were saying that are not online, and that was a little disappointing to me. There's people that I'm in circles with that were just very disappointed, saying things that I wouldn't expect them to say. And I don't know, like if you look at it statistically, Clemson was not a bad team last year. They were in the top 15 in first downs. They were in the top 15 in yards per game. What they were doing was they weren't finishing, which they just came out with an article. Dabo's word for the year, he has a word for the year every single year, is finish. And if Clemson literally just finishes last year, finishes in the red zone, finishes drive, finishes kicks, they're undefeated. The Duke game, they rushed for over 250 yards and passed for over 250 yards and lost by 21 points. That doesn't happen. It's happened once in Clemson's football history. So you take away the turnovers, they finish those drives, if you will. They beat Duke. They beat Miami if they finish, don't turn the ball over. They beat Florida State if they kick the 27-yard field goal and don't turn the ball over. So, the difference between 9 wins, even 8 wins, in an undefeated season is 3, 4, 5 plays. And if you talk to people inside the program, they could point to the 5 different plays that cost us games. The margins are so thin. And Mitch, to add to that, when I was playing there, if we beat a subpar opponent by not enough, they had released a video of us dancing in the locker room, and the comments would be, "Why are you dancing? You should have beaten them more." It's like winning in college football is hard, and that's no excuse for underperforming, because 9 wins is underperforming for what that team was last year.
Sure,
but the accusations were not realistic. However, winning in football is hard, so you dance, you celebrate when you actually get those wins, because then you have a 9-win season like we did this year, in which it's so disappointing because you should have been so much better.
Yeah, I mean, it's grass is always greener syndrome, right? I mean,
right.
We are so quick to forget where we've come from and lose that perspective. So I think that's well said. For the roster this year, it's a talented roster. It's a roster that, if not picked to outright win the conference, is one of the top 2, maybe 3 teams, if you believe that Florida State's going to run it back and Miami is this championship contender all of a sudden. So tell me, holistically as a roster, what's your confidence level in Clemson? And I guess let's start there. We'll break it down after that.
I'm at an 8 out of 10. So I'm very confident. How they ended last year. So again, we go back to the word finish. So the thing that cost them games last year was finishing, and then what they did at the end of the year, they finished. They went 5-0 at the end of the year, and what I saw in terms of Cade Klubnik, playmakers who would not have necessarily played had there not been injuries. There was 10 injuries in that wide receiver room last year. We had walk-ons starting in some of the games, which shout out walk-on red shirts. We matter too.
Right.
But we have depth at the wide receiver position. We have Bryant Wesco, who's already logged a faster catapult time than Nate Wiggins did. And what catapult is, guys, it's a GPS tracking system that players wear on themselves during practice to see how fast they're going, how much output in terms of power and energy they're giving. Like, do they need a day off? Do they need, whatever. There's a lot of analytics that go into it. Bryant Wesco already has faster and more impressive times than Nate Wiggins did as a senior. Bryant Wesco is 18 years old. He's already put on 20 pounds. He came in at 160. He's at 182 now. So he's a guy that's going to step up and play immediately. TJ Moore is arguably a better receiver, comes in the summer, and he's going to be phenomenal. Then you have the returners in Antonio Williams, Tyler Brown, Adam Randall, who weighed 230 pounds at 4% body fat, which I don't know if people realize that is insane.
Yeah.
Jake Brenningstool put on 20 pounds. He's at 240 now. And the things that does to that offense is now when Jake Brenningstool, the tight end, is on the field, you don't know if he's going to, if it's a run or pass play, because now when he's got that much bulk, he can play, he can block, he can put his nose in the trenches and be a factor. So I'm confident in that. I want to see that. My biggest question marks are the offensive line, which I'm really impressed with what Matt Luke has done there. I went to a practice in the spring and just the energy level. And I'm going to go and get in front of this too. Thomas Austin was the offensive line coach last year. He was there when I was there as a GA. I love Thomas Austin. Very, very smart individual, knows football, knows the game. Take it easy on him. I mean, we don't know everything that went on behind closed doors. I promise you it wasn't all on him. He had to eat it, but it wasn't all on him. But you bring in Matt Luke, and to Matt Luke's credit, he is different. The energy he brings for every single play and rep at practice is unbelievable, Mitch. And one of the things that I was most impressed with, he reminds me a lot of Brent Venable. And what I mean is, when I was at Clemson, Brent Venables would stop a play to move a player over an inch, 2 inches. Hey, Ben Boulware was there. He would stop before the play started, have Ben move over a step to the right, and then he would start the play back up. Those are the type of details that win you games. And then obviously he brought the intensity with himself too, as he's famously known for on the sidelines. Matt Luke has that same demeanor. He was stopping guys at fall camp over a misstep by a couple inches. Guys, they say football is a game of inches for a reason. Those little minute details are incredibly, incredibly important. And then if you bring that passion along with it, you have a great, great football coach that can drive change. So my biggest question marks were the offensive line and Cade Klubnik cerebrally. So this is his second year with Garrett Riley. So he's got a full year under his belt. It seems like he's going to have weapons. He's going to have hopefully consistent weapons throughout the year if they can stay healthy. And if the offensive line is playing like I think they will, like I saw them play in the spring, I think they can take a big step forward with that offense.
Well, you make a good point, and I appreciate the offensive line discussion as well. I mean, gosh, so much of this game comes down to if you can win in the trenches, and having a great offensive line coach like Matt Luke is known for being, gets a bad rap for, his tenure as a head coach, and the lack of success, the disappointment that came out of that. But people forget very quickly. I think similarly to Sam Pittman, maybe out of his depth a little bit as a head coach, but boy, coaching the big uglies up front, like there are few better in the country at doing that. You got 3 returners along the offensive line, but you mentioned Cade Klubnik, and specifically you mentioned his development cerebrally, right? Last year, it was 16 touchdowns, 19 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, nearly 3,000 yards passing. I covered him in high school. I know the physical tools that he's got, a great arm. He can put it where he wants it most of the time. Need to see that completion percentage come up a little bit. It was at 64%, which isn't bad, but to take that next step, you want to see him be closer to 70%, right? Tell me what you see from a mental aspect in Cade Klubnik's game. What did you see last year? What are you hoping to see in 2024?
Yeah, and then I wasn't there. That's a great question, by the way. I'm not there. I'm not in the locker room, not in the huddle. But from what I saw on the couch, so it's a lot easier to pick these things apart on the couch. But it seems like some of the guys I've talked to have reiterated the same things. He looked like he had trouble with with setting the line, so hey, does the line need to shift to the right? Are they already shifting to the right? And I see heat's coming from the left. I need to flip the protection. I didn't see that happening last year. Again, it could have been, but I didn't see it happening. And another thing I didn't see that he did well was 5 guys. There's 5 guys on the offensive line. 5 guys can't block 6. If there's a hot guy coming, you need to know where your hot route is. So what that means in layman's term, you have that 6th guy coming. He's not going to be blocked. You, as a quarterback, have to be able to account for him. You see it pre-snap. You should be able to identify those things. And no, every route scheme is going to have a hot route, or you can check it if you see it. I didn't see that happening. The game seemed very fast for him. And there's multitude of reasons why that could be. It could be poor offensive line play. It could have been poor receivers. You don't know who you're throwing to, so you're already panicking. You don't have that confidence. But if he can get that stuff down, he's phenomenal. Like you said, he's got the tools. He can run. He can make almost any throw. And I'm okay with the picks. I really am. I want to see him trying to put the ball down the field. But what I don't want to see is the stupid mistakes. And like I said, you didn't flip the protection. You didn't identify your hot. Like, those are simple things. And yeah, from a fan's perspective, it's not the sexy plays. But what you don't realize is, hey, if he finds his hot route in that Florida State game, he doesn't get freaking drilled in the chest and lose the ball.
Yeah.
So those are the things that and it flips the entire game, where had he made that hot route, maybe we get a 3-yard gain. Maybe we get an incompletion, but you live to fight another down. And that is crucial. Do not turn the ball over. Do not turn the ball over. And if I can see him doing that at the line of scrimmage this year, I will feel very, very confident in his ability and what Clemson's offense is going to do.
Flip the page for me. Take me over to the defense. You've got just a handful of returning starters on the team, not necessarily a commentary on the depth of that defense. And boy, I mean, there are a few locker rooms as loaded as what Clemson has. What do you expect from the defense, and where do you expect their strength, their identity to come from?
The strength and identity is going to come from the front 7. Peter Woods is going to play. He's going to be similar to Christian Wilkins. He's going to play every single position on that defensive line. Yeah. They talked about him playing more defensive end, and they thought he would cut down to 295. They did their weigh-in the other day, and he was 319. So didn't lose as much weight as maybe people thought, but
Just missed it.
Apparently, yeah, just a bit. That's a bit outside. But apparently, he's cut body fat, so his body fat percentage has gone down, and they say he's moving better. I don't know. We'll see. But what I did see in the spring during the spring practices, he can set the edge better than most defensive ends I've ever seen. And by set the edge, I mean you establish the outside position. You won't let the offensive lineman get leverage on you or disposition you, and you're able to make the running back go out of where he's supposed to go. So you set that edge so he has to make a different cut, whether he bounces it wide and goes outside so he backtracks to keep going, or he has to cut it in and go into the trash. So they tried double teaming him, and he just stoned everybody. So very, very strong human being, phenomenal player. But the unsung hero of that defensive line is right next to him, in DeMonte Capehart. If you love good physical defensive line play, good hand placement, violent hand placement, go watch the play. Just type in DeMonte Capehart, Notre Dame, and you'll see him shock the center and drive him back 4 yards in the backfield and then tackle Audric Estime on the way through it. I don't know if you realize this, guys. Audric Estime was a huge running back.
Yeah, he was.
DeMonte Capehart, he essentially tackled the center and the running back. So those two guys are amazing. And now you got TJ Parker coming back. It's going to be his sophomore campaign. Going to be looking a little different. Not wearing 12 this year. Going to be wearing number 3. But one of the best pass rushers in college football, but definitely the ACC. So the other defensive end spot is the biggest question mark, but I'm not very concerned about it. You have DJ Mayo, who's come in. He's a freshman, and he has shocked everybody. He's already put on 25 pounds. He came in at 225, 230. He's at 250. He's 6'7", and apparently he can move. I haven't seen him in person yet, but everything I'm hearing out of camp is just glowing review. Then you have Cade Denhoff, who's projected to start. Just a phenomenal all-around good defensive lineman. So I'm very excited about him. Then you go to the linebackers. And not only do you have really good linebackers, you have depth. So you have your normal starters will probably be Barrett Carter and Wade Woodaz, which is the best name for a linebacker in the country right now.
Yeah.
Bring the wood as. Those are two. Barrett Carter's the best linebacker in college football. And I don't even think it's close. He's a phenomenal player. He can play safety. He can play Mike. He can play Sam. He can play the Will. He can play everywhere. And then you got Wade Woodaz, who maybe the rest of the country doesn't know about him, but you'll learn about him this year. Phenomenal player. And he's consistent. He plays just as well in the pass game as he does in the run game. But then you got Sammy Brown, 5-star guy that comes in this year. Right behind him, right behind both of them, can play both sides. And they're saying he's one of the strongest guys on the team already. He's 18 years old. That is unheard of. And then next to him, you got Kobe McLeod. So you got 4 guys who can rotate and play. That is not even to mention Jamal Anderson, who plays more of that Barrett Carter style where he can play multiple parts of the linebacker position and a little bit of safety. Mm-hmm. Go back and watch the spring game and watch the interception he had. This guy's a playmaker. His dad played for the Falcons, played right back for the Falcons, Jamal Anderson. I don't know if everyone remembers him. But phenomenal linebacker who's not getting much love. And then, honestly, the defensive backs are going to be good too. And I'm hearing a lot of good things about their depth. We got another freshman out of Texas, Corian Gibson. I don't know if he's from your neck of the woods, Mitch, but he's wowing everybody at camp. And I wouldn't be shocked to see him getting some significant snaps in the Georgia game. I mean, you got Avion Terrell, who just got better and better every single week. You got Khalil Barnes, who got better and better every single week. You got RJ Mickens coming back. You got Sherrod Koval, who's coming back. I mean, you have a very, very deep secondary as well. I mean, the name of the game on defense is depth, and it's just a plethora of riches over there. So I'm very, very excited about the defense. And for some reason, some people aren't. But and Shelton Lewis is another guy I want to mention. Very, very fast, very, very good, very cocky player. I like watching him play. He's one of those like more stereotypical defensive backs that are going to make a play and let you know.
Yeah. Well, so you've got ACC opponents, the fans shaking in their boots now. If they weren't familiar with Clemson's roster, they certainly are after that rundown. So take me to the schedule. Everybody is counting Clemson out against Georgia. I saw a take earlier on Twitter where someone was saying, you know what, Clemson's going to knock off Georgia in week 1. It's going to be stunning. And that was refreshing to my football brain because I'll be honest, I've already put that in stone, right? Georgia 1-0, Clemson's going to be 0-1. It's fine. What does Clemson have to do to knock off Georgia? And then more importantly, keep that momentum rolling against a plucky App State team who's a group of 5 playoff favorite. NC State is week 3. And then you get Florida State in a road game in week 5.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. But number one, I've said it 1,000 times. I'll say it 1,000 more. Turnovers. We can't turn the ball over in the Georgia game. So in big games like this, it comes down to 6 plays. It's going to be a play here, a play there. It really is. Like, a game, you might have 100 plays played during the game, but 6 of those are going to be significant if you think about it. A turnover here, a drop pass here, a pass deflection here, a sack here. A blown assignment. It comes down to those little things, the little details. But what I'm excited about to see in Georgia is it's strength on strength. Georgia's offensive line is their strength. Clemson's defensive line is their strength. I cannot wait to see that matchup. Clemson's offensive line has some question marks. Georgia's defensive line has some question marks. So I'm curious to see how they match up. Carson Beck, I think, is a good quarterback. I think he gets maybe a little bit too much hype. I wasn't blown away by him last year. Let's just put it that way. Like I thought he was a good quarterback. Heisman watch, I think that's a little lofty in terms of who else he's competing with, but I don't know. But the running game is going to be great at Georgia. You got Trevor Etienne who's coming in there, brother of Travis, little brother of Travis, I mind you. Yeah. I'm not sure if he's going to be suspended yet for that game with everything that's happened in the offseason. Not to make light of anything, but they just kicked off a player in Ra Thomas, one of the receivers that they were probably looking for to be a key contributor. They got a wide receiver, and I'm forgetting where he's from at Georgia, and off the top of my head, but if he comes back to me, I'll say his name. But I think our defensive backs match up very well with their wide receivers. I think based on Georgia's reputation the past few years and what Clemson has done the past 2 years, people want to go ahead and say that's 0-1. I really don't think so. I think 14 points is insane. I would take the plus sign all day. If it didn't violate my rule, you never bet on your team. You never bet against your rival. You always lose. So if you're not a Clemson fan, do the plus sign. I promise you. Like, I think Clemson's going to win that game. I'm a little biased. I'm in that orange Kool-Aid. But if I step out of my emotions and look at that game, I don't think if Georgia wins, it won't be by 14 points unless Clemson turns the ball over 1,000 times. But then you got App State, who you can't make mistakes against. They're a really good, really well-coached football team. You get a bye week, which is going to be great, and then you head into NC State. And NC State's coming to Clemson. That's helpful. But NC State has a plethora of weapons on the outside. I think that's going to be the best offense we see this year. Casey Concepcion is a phenomenal wide receiver. Shout out to my fantasy team. He's on the fantasy team. Right. And the biggest question mark with that team is Grayson McCall. Does his skill set transfer from Coastal Carolina to NC State? I think it will. So that game I have circled, and then Florida State, that defense is just going to be stout. But I think every Clemson fan probably has that game circled due to A, it being Florida State, and B, with DJ Uiagalelei coming over. There's no bad blood for most Clemson fans. I think most Clemson fans like DJU for the most part. Yeah. I think most of the bad blood comes from just transferring. No one likes the transfer portal. So, but it's going to be fun. I mean, if we get past that, Wake Forest, Virginia, then you got Louisville. We don't know what Louisville's going to be. Sure. And then right after that is Virginia Tech at Virginia Tech. So Blacksburg's a tough place to play. That's going to be tough. So hopefully they don't sleepwalk into that game. And then, Pitt, Citadel, and South Carolina. So I think Clemson 11-1, 12-0 is not out of the question. I know I'm a little biased. I might get some heat for this, but I think they'll be 12-0 at the end of the year.
Okay. Well, that was going to be my next question. So we'll wrap it up on this. They go 11-1. They go 12-0. I'm assuming you have them winning the ACC championship game. So if all of that transpires, where does Clemson match up against Ohio State, against Oregon? Obviously, we're going to get to see week 1 against Georgia, but what are the realistic possibilities of Clemson winning a national championship this year?
Yeah, Ohio State is my favorite to win the national championship this year. Go and get that out there. They're just loaded at every single position. Every single position has depth, but you never know. So it depends on what happens throughout the season. Will Howard could go out there and just blow it. That offensive line, the question marks they have coming in, could turn into periods or exclamation points and be like, those aren't question marks, those are realities. So I think Ohio State's the team to beat, though, in all of college football. I mean, just the plethora of talent. But I truly think, if you look at the talent composition, it's not that big of a gap. I think if you look at 24/7's talent composition, I think Clemson's 10th in the nation. So it's not that big of a gap between 1 and 10. Or, 2 and 10. I think Ohio State's on a different level right now in terms of the amount of talent they have. Oregon's going to be a really, really good football team. They're going to go as far as Dylan Gabriel can take them. So I think that's far. I think Dan Lanning's a great coach. I think he gets too much flack for not being able to win the big one. Ryan Day, too. And one thing I want to say to those people who say they can't win the big one is maybe they lose those games, but they keep getting themselves in that position, which is really hard to do. So in order to lose a big game, you have to get there first, and you have to make it a big game. So I love both those coaches. I think they're phenomenal. Texas is another one that I have a big question mark with Texas and their defense, but I think Clemson can match up with anybody in the country, to be honest with you.
I like it, man. I tell you what, I was high on Clemson. It's hard not to be higher on them. After talking to you, after running down that roster, I've got them in the ACC championship game once again. And I think they're certainly my favorite to win the conference and go do something in this playoff. It's going to be fascinating to see how this 12-team playoff breaks down, where the different teams end up getting seeded. I think that first round of matchups, both the first round and then obviously the conference champs that get the bye, seeing who they get to play in that second round off campus, that's going to have storylines that we could talk about for weeks and months. So I'm excited to get there. Certainly not wanting to race through the season, but I'm locked in, man. I can tell you are as well. And it sounds like the Clemson Tigers are a threat.
We're going to find out week 1. There's not much time. This playoff game week 1. So
between y'all and the Aggies taking on Notre Dame, which I'm going to talk Notre Dame with Ty Hildebrand next week. That'll be fun to break down. But week 1's going to be a lot of fun. It feels like there's a lot of
Miami and Florida.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of okay, we're going to the playoffs coming out of week 1, and okay, the season might be on thin ice. I think coming out of week 1 out of the fan bases.
And what's crazy to add to that point, so you're talking about Clemson's fan base and the hot seat that Dabo's on. If Clemson goes and loses to Georgia, all the Clemson fans are going to say, I told you so. We're going to suck again. Like, these are the same people. And it's like, if they beat Georgia, they're going to forget that the past 4 years happened. Yeah. So I'm curious to see, but I love first week big games like this. You really find out what your team's made of rather than, playing St. Agnes School for Girls the first couple of weeks and then jumping into a real schedule. Like, and you're battle tested early. So it helps you out against some games down the road where maybe another team hasn't done that. So I'm excited. I'm so locked in. I talk to my son every day about football. We watched a little Clemson highlight from the Chick-fil-A Bowl in 2011. He said that LSU players were all mustard. He's 3 years old. So LSU players, you're all mustard. And I like that trash talk. I'm bringing that with me this year.
I love it, man. I love it. Moose, thanks so much for hopping on with us. We're excited to watch the Clemson Tigers this year. And that concludes our ACC preview as well. For the listeners at home, we really appreciate you hanging out with us. Stay tuned, though. We've got plenty more Group of 5 coming up. And then we've also got our season projections, the whole kit and caboodle. It's all coming up next week. So we're excited for that. Moose, appreciate you hanging out. We'll talk Clemson football a little bit later on in the season, I'm sure. Hope you have a great day.
Oh, yeah. You too. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, brother. All right. Well, for everyone at home, like, subscribe, comment what you think about Clemson, the ACC. Appreciate y'all hanging out with us. And until next time, so long, everybody.
Gracious him. How about